Welcome to Mom is My Emergency Contact podcast, the podcast for single moms figuring out how the fuck to navigate life, dating, and starting over. I am Lisa, your host. All right, it's time for another episode of Too Crazy to Be True, the segment where real life sounds more like a movie plot than actual reality. You know those moments when you find out something about your life and suddenly something you thought you knew kind of shifts? Well, today's story is one of those moments. Imagine growing up thinking you know who your family is, you know your parents, your history, your identity, and then one day you discover something that changes everything. Not just a small family secret, but something that sounds like it belongs in a crime documentary. So, how do you process something like that? How do you reconcile the person you loved with the reality you discover? And how do you move forward with when your own story suddenly feels like something out of a movie? So, today we're going to hear that story directly from her. Today we have Lisa Alexander. Thank you, Lisa, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Lisa, you were sharing your story on another Facebook page, and I really quickly. So, what you don't know is I really quickly went through your. I saw the podcast or the YouTube interview, and I didn't get like the whole story, but just the beginning and the gist. And I'm like, oh, this is definitely a too crazy to be true story. So, and then that's how we kind of connected. But why don't we go into it? Just tell us your story.
Well, I'm originally from Canada, Winnipeg, Canada, and my mother got married at 16. Her and my biological father eloped when she was 16 years old in the middle of the winter, and her parents weren't too happy. Police were looking for him. My father was a wild man. He was adopted at birth, and his poor parents, he was running away with the circus by the time he was 13. He was just, you couldn't control him. His nickname was Whitey. He had blonde hair and blue eyes, and he was a very good looking man. I'm the firstborn child, and life was pretty stormy with Whitey, let me tell you. My poor mother, I don't know how she stuck it out. And then with my father, I have a sister and a brother I grew up with. So basically, he was in and out of our life until I was like 9 years old. My grandparents, thank God, my mother's parents were wonderful people. And they would, we would go back and forth living with them. We never lived anywhere very long. You just, you never knew when Whitey was going to show up or what he was going to do. He was wild. He just had a wild side. He was a real womanizer. One time he kidnapped me from my mom to piss her off, I guess. And I was just a baby, and the police were looking for me. And, that's kind of the beginning of my life. We never lived anywhere very long. Life was a storm. uh, Being the oldest, I carried a lot on my shoulders, a lot of, worried about my mom. Eventually, my mom got tired of it and finally divorced. And by the time I was 9, but even up to like 10 years old, she still would see him. We'd see him. We went out on one of his yachts one summer up at the lake, and there was a storm, and the boat sank. And the owner of the Winnipeg Jets boat was, the hockey team, their boat was behind us. And it just was always wild when you were with him. You never knew what was next. And so eventually my mother remarried, and my stepfather wouldn't let us see our biological father. The last time I remember seeing him from a distance, I was 11 years old and walking down the street in our new neighborhood, and I was afraid to see him. So, he tried to call me over and I wouldn't go. Well, from that, I lost touch with him from 11 years old. And we ended up moving to Los Angeles with our stepfather in 1975. And later I found out that he had moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 1974. So, but I had no way to get a hold of him. It wasn't internet. We're talking late 70s, like 78, 79. I had no way to find him. And, I think he'd married a couple women, but again, nothing was consistent. And so anyways, we were in Los Angeles, and of course, a teenager, 15, 16, I was homesick. I wanted to go back to Winnipeg, and I did. Drove my grandparents crazy. And one of the young men that I went to school with, he said, I know your father. I go, what do you mean you know my father? He goes, yeah, he's the captain of our yacht in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "And he's in town." I'm like, "What?" So this particular young man at the time was having a big party, and everyone knew everyone because it was a small school, and they're all the people I grew up with. And so I went there waiting, and his parents were out of town. So, but there comes, knock on the door, and there's my father, blonde hair, blue eye, husky, tanned with jewelry, very flashy. His friend who was, taller than him. My dad was 6'4", and I think the other gentleman was like 6'7" or something. So very intimidating and very, my friends were like, "What?" And so I reconnected with my dad at that time. So that would have been 16 years old. I spent some time with him before he went back to Florida. And, he bought me a cute outfit, and it was weird. It was strange to, start to reconnect. And, he knew me as a child, not as a teenager. And I didn't, I knew him, but I just remember a lot of bad things too. But still, he was my dad, and I wanted to know more. And so then he finally left and went back to Florida, and I was living. I ended up living with a boyfriend at the time. That was smart, right? and uh, and so, anyways, we ended up driving a car. He had a boyfriend, and I and another friend drive a car from Winnipeg to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we did that. And, we hung out there. We stayed on his boat out there. And he had a flashy house by the water, right off the water. And his cars were big Lincolns with Big Mac. His nickname was Big Mac because our last name was McDonald. His biological name was Ian Jackson McDonald, but he went by Whitey. And, but in Florida, he went by Big Mac or Jack. So anyways, he had Big Mac on the bottom of his pool. He had Big Mac on his, airplane, Big Mac on his cars with gold plaques, these big Lincolns and whatever. So we hung out there, and then we drove back. Well, the second time he wanted my boyfriend to come, I wanted to go, and he wouldn't let me go. And I'm like, well, I don't get it. And we got in an argument. Well, he had my boyfriend pull back a boat from Florida into Winnipeg. I think it was stashed with marijuana. Well, I'm almost 100% sure. And so, anyways, at that point, things for me weren't going so great. So my grandparents called him up and said, "Come get her." He drove all the way from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in his white Lincoln with the blue top and, plaques and Big Mac on the side and Florida license plate. That's kind of a big deal for Winnipeg. And they still don't have freeways, okay? And so, he knocked on the door and he said, "Come on, you're going with me." And I don't think he gave me a choice. And he got the boyfriend to write a post-dated check because I owned all the furniture. And off we went, drove back to Florida, and that was a whole new world for me. I was living there with him. I started realizing what he was doing. And one night he woke me up and he said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And there were green trash bags lining the kitchen all over the floor in marijuana. And there was a station wagon on the side of court carport, which was kind of private. And they had the panels off, and they were stuffing the car to get across Canada. And I just looked at it and went, "Okay, whatever," And I mean, he was into the cocaine, and it was a wild life. And he was married to a woman that had a daughter that he raised, helped raise. Wasn't his daughter. And I don't think the wife liked me too much, as a teenager, a little wild, and I didn't keep the room clean or whatever. But anyhow, he was seeing other women. And, they were calling me to see him, and I'd go hang out with them at night. She didn't, she wasn't liking it. So anyways, I spent time off and on there. I worked as a valet parker at the big yacht club that he was a member of. I saw a lot of stuff, it was just a very wild life with him. And so from there, I decided to come back to Los Angeles. And then after that, he, um, he came to visit me once, and he came in this van, and then he flew back. And my sister and I and a friend, we had him in a VW bug. This is what I can remember. And I had some apartment he came to, and then, but he looked really nervous. And so this is towards the end. So all of a sudden, uh, I lost contact. Well, he tried to phone me once at my apartment. My girlfriend answered, and that was it. I wasn't home, and that was the last we ever heard of him. Now, the wife he was with, I had a phone book that had her family's phone number in it, but I didn't remember her last name. And I called her family, and they hung up on me. They wouldn't, you know, and so basically, you know, I would get like newspaper clippings from my grandparents talking about my dad. This was a really big story because he was smuggling marijuana in large amounts from Florida into Winnipeg, Canada. And so, and then like his best friend was a parliament member. They call it an MLA, Bob Wilson. So, anyways, and his other friend was, the owner of the Winnipeg hockey team, and they called it the Rounders, all the big guys. My dad was rubbing shoulders with some pretty scary dudes. So, anyways, from what I heard, my grandparents would send me the newspaper clippings, kind of like they weren't sure they were doing the right thing, but they felt bad. But basically, they put him in jail in Florida to be extradited back to Winnipeg, and he played a heart attack, and they put him, he's 42 at the time, and they put him in a Miami Jacksonville hospital, and he paid a guard off 10 grand, and a dentist friend had clothes sitting in the stairwell, and my father disappeared, and never heard from him 30 something years.
Wait, Lisa, let me stop you for a second. Holy crap. Okay. I was taking notes when you were talking. So when you said he had a airplane?
Yeah, he had a little not a huge airplane.
Okay, so he had an airplane, he had big cars. Like, what did you think he was doing for a job? Did he say what he was doing?
you know my father didn't say a lot. I mean, he was a big mouth. He talked, but I mean, I think I was picking it up pretty quick. I was pretty sharp. I don't really. I mean, I think when I saw the marijuana bags and in the kitchen, kind of like, oh, okay, that was, and and then I figured out later that the prior run with the boyfriend that had to be but that was a tester. The first time we did it, I think was a test to get through the border to see if we get harassed. So the second time he wouldn't let me go because he was that time.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the boat with your boyfriend. So there was marijuana on the boat and he was trying to see if he could get it through that.
The first one without marijuana, the second one with, and that's why I couldn't go. He was protecting
Oh.
me in the way he knew how.
So you saw the marijuana bag, so you kind of like thought, okay, I kind of know what my dad's doing. But the clippings in the newspaper, were you already with him? Because it sounds like he was arrested. Were you with him at the time?
No, no, that was when, he'd come to LA, and we took him to the airport, and that was the last I ever talked to him. So that all happened after, and see, prior to that, of course, I found out a lot later, but before they arrested him, the FBI at the time, Michael Weavers, he was the chief FBI agent at the time. They brought my dad in and basically said, "You work for us, or we're turning you into Canada." And so he became an informant for the FBI, doing surveillance for large narcotic rings outside of Florida. So I never really knew why they arrested him because they did make a deal. The only thing I can figure is that Canada really wanted their man. And because it made Canada look bad, and especially because a parliament member was involved. It's the first time in history that their phones were tapped in the parliament. And so, Bob Wilson's still alive to this day in Vancouver, still trying to clear his name. And now he's in a retirement home. I don't even know if he's completely with it, but he served 7 years because they couldn't find my dad.
Okay, so when he left, was he arrested? So when you drove him to the airport and he left, he wasn't arrested yet, correct?
Yeah, he wasn't arrested yet. Shortly after that, they arrested him, made a deal with him. He did it for a little while, or maybe he'd been doing it a little prior to the time I dropped him off. I don't know the dates exactly. It doesn't seem like he was doing it for very long. And then they arrested him. And I think it was because they were getting a lot of pressure from Canada, is what I believe. I don't, you know, and next thing you know, he was gone. That was it. He never contacted us. He never, there was nothing. I would search, I would, nothing, absolutely nothing. And the phone number that I had his wife's parents' name on, the phone book disappeared. So I just, I never, I didn't know what town they were in. I didn't know her last name. I would have found him if I would have known that, but I didn't. And I was young.
So he escaped, right? Is
Yeah.
that I'm getting it? Okay. Wow. Holy crap. Okay. So you never heard from him, and then how did the story unfold?
Well, uh, 30 years goes by, and, I'm a strong Christian woman. I prayed and prayed and prayed. I used to say, God, I just need to know the truth. I don't want to go the rest of my life. I need closure, whatever it may be. And about 5 years prior to that, my son met Michael Gabati, the owner of the Winnipeg Jets in Palm Springs. And he basically told my son that my father was swimming with the fishies. And so, we kind of started to think maybe he's dead. I mean, how could he go that long and not contact his three children? And so, anyways, just, I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I'd gone to Winnipeg in January 2014 to bury my mom's mom. And everyone asked me, oh, have you ever heard about your dad? No, 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 because this is considered a legend in Winnipeg. It was high profile. So anyway, I came back and I'm having a drink with my friend at the bar. And I said, I need to accept my dad's dead. And my chin started to quiver, and I'm not missing a beat here. And all of a sudden, my phone rings. And my mother says, are you sitting down? Your father is alive. He's been arrested. I mean, what do you say? I was in shock. My girlfriend's looking at me. We're just like, I just said, I have to accept he's dead. And my phone rings. I mean, the timing is so bizarre, and it's so God, because just as I was finally ready to accept, he was gone for good, I get this phone call. And it was all over the news. It was all over AOL. I went home, I was on my AOL. There's my dad at 42, now 72, an old man. And all I want to do is find him. They found him in Homosassa, Florida. And and they took him from there to Orlando, from there to Miami, and put him in the Miami jail. I went the first time, I couldn't see him. I had to prove I was his daughter because this is federal. And then I went back the second time, and they said, sorry, because I had an appointment now. Sorry, you can't see him. He's in the hospital. We don't allow people to see him unless they're actually dying. Well, that's how he escaped the first times. But anyway, so um, my husband and I, like, we just were really persistent, and wrote letters, and called them and called them. And I'm at the hotel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I call the media, and they're on the way. They want to do the story, you know, and because it was in their newspapers back in the day also. So all of a sudden, the warden phones me, and the warden phones me. I don't know if that happens too often. And he says, you've twisted our arm. We're going to let you see your father tomorrow. So he was in the same hospital that he disappeared from 30 something years prior. And the next day at 11 o'clock, I get there, and I get scanned, and I get by federal marshal, and I get escorted up 7 floors, and they didn't tell him I was coming. And I walk in there, and he's asleep, shackled to a bed with an IV. Now, this old man, 72 years old, and 3 federal marshals in the room, and they weren't going to leave. They weren't budging. And I went in there, and I shook him, and I said, Dad, it's me. And he looked up, and he smiled. And I go, I didn't know what to say. I was pretty in shock myself. And I said, well, how do I look? He goes, you look older, but you look good. And so anyways, I had a certain length of time I could sit with him, but he got really nervous and wanted me to leave. And I said, oh, no, 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 I'm not leaving. You just met your match. I got this much time. I'm staying. So I made sure my back, tried to cover his face from the marshals so that he wouldn't be intimidated from, think about it. He was hiding all that time. And, one of the questions is, how did you escape? Because one of the newspapers in Florida said he hit a guard over the head. That's not true. And he paid a guard off 10 grand to unshackle him and turned his head. And it was Bob Wilson, who served 7 years, innocent or guilty. And he said he was innocent. And, we chatted a bit, but you could tell he was nervous because of the marshals in the room. And anyway, I know they wanted to extradite him back to Winnipeg. I left him, and of course, all the family were just waiting for me to call him and tell him, what was it like, and everybody's kind of crazy. And anyways, I went to an immigration attorney, tried to stop the extradition. That was too late, and I figured it was, but I gave it a shot. And that was it. He was taken to RCMP, came from Winnipeg, and had him shackled to a wheelchair and flew him back to Winnipeg. They put him in a local jail there. Didn't know how sick he was. Nobody would tell me. They're not allowed to. And we became friends with the guards at the jail, and because it's a small jail right downtown Winnipeg, and they would get us on the phone with him a lot, so we kind of got to know him and bond with him. And then he had a court date coming up. I'm the one that found the attorney, who was a big criminal attorney in all Canada. We flew in, and I had just done a wedding for my daughter. I was exhausted. And we flew in and we went to the hotel we were going to stay at. And we were at the bar and we sat with the attorney and his associate and had a couple glasses of wine, pretty stressed out. But the jail was walking distance from where we were staying. So we walked over to the jail. We had an appointment. He went in there, and there he is in a wheelchair. And I still really don't know the complete, you know, his health. It was prostate cancer that spread, but how bad, I didn't know. So anyway, I walked in and I wasn't as friendly as the first time. The second time, I was kind of like, "Yeah, screwed up, just say it." And I lost it in there. And the guard's looking at me, and he's nervous because I could have gotten thrown out of there. And I kept saying, "You screwed up, just say it. You screwed up." And he finally, "Okay, okay, I screwed up." I think that's the only thing he ever confessed. He never said, "I'm sorry," or "I wish I would have done it different," ever. That's just not the way Whitey rolled. Period. It just, his pride was too big. So basically, we were at the courtroom the next day, and they wheel him in, and there we're sitting, my sister and I, and some of the media was there. They ended up giving him 2 years. It's called 2 years less a day house arrest because he was sick and he was dying of stage 4 cancer. And so they basically wanted to send him to the Salvation Army. Well, I don't know if people know how cold Winnipeg gets, but yeah, that's no. We wouldn't let that happen. Even though he didn't deserve it, he still was our father, and that wasn't going to happen. So anyways, a gentleman that was his friend when he was young let him stay there for a while, but my father kept falling, and he ended up in this hospital in Winnipeg. So my sister and I flew back. We spent a lot of time in Winnipeg, and um, we tried to get him into a nursing home, and his doctor there didn't like him very much. He wasn't very supportive. But we ended up having a meeting with all the board of Manitoba. And my sister and I had been out the night before having a little fun, I think we weren't feeling so good the next morning. We were so stressed out, and he's looking at us like, "Oh gosh, those are my girls." And so, anyways, we sat at that board meeting, and we got a lot of guts, my sister and I. And I'm kind of the one that did most of everything because I'm the oldest. It's just my personality. And the doctor was giving us not the nicest looks, but after that meeting, some of them were in tears, and they basically granted him a nursing home that had a long waiting list. I said, "Hey, you brought him here, Winnipeg. They brought him here. Your government, you need to pay for it. I'm not paying for it." And we got him in a nursing home within 3 days, and they took very good care of him there. Um, and then we started to learn a lot about him. Spending that time, the stories, and um, just learning what he did and where he went. He did crazy stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So let me just make sure that the listeners understand what folded here. So he was smuggling marijuana across from Canada to the United States, correct?
The other way.
Oh, United States to Canada. Okay. And what was the charge? Like, how much are we
Uh,
talking about?
500 pounds of marijuana. And back then, it's illegal. And so, yeah. And
Wow.
he, you know, I learned, a lot of things unfolded after. I did talk to the daughter he raised for when I went to Florida to see him for the second time before he was extradited. She told me some stuff. What I did is I got his Freedom of Information Act, and
Mm.
from immigration attorney, which tells you a lot of things about him. Well, they granted him a green card. He could cross the border with money in a suitcase, marijuana, and they weren't allowed to stop him. He would tell us that he had all this stuff and we didn't believe him. But then I found out it was true. Then they really shouldn't have arrested him because they made a deal with him and they reneged on it. And I did become, friendly with the chief FBI agent, a very nice gentleman. They interviewed him on TV. I mean, I've been on talk radio a couple times. The night after he died, I was on talk radio. We've been on TV. I got very politically involved at one point. I'm like, let him go home. I was really striving to let him his home their main home was in Homosassa, Florida. And they had a farm there, a ranch or something like that. But you know, uh I really tried hard to get him across the border and back home, but that wasn't going to happen. And I got pretty close, though. I had some people at the border. I mean, I had a lot of guts, and so I did things I didn't even know I had inside of me, which God gave me the strength, and it actually built up my confidence a lot. And but I learned a lot about what he did on the run, and that was interesting. He when he first disappeared, his wife met up with him. She stayed with him, ran with him. They went to Colorado, and he started a gas station and a company. He was very creative, and he loved money, obviously. And he was towing for one of the local police departments. And at night, he was sleeping in their cell. Of course, not locked, waiting for calls to tow for them. They had no idea they had a fugitive. Um, yeah, I mean, he did there's just so many stories because he was so colorful and he did such in an emergency, you wouldn't want anyone else but him. He just handled situations, he just was one of those people. He didn't think twice. He just did what he had to do.
Let me ask you something, Lisa. So, when he was a fugitive, was he like on the most wanted?
Yes, actually he was.
Wow.
Yes, he was.
That's crazy. Okay. So, let's just turn to you, okay? Because this has got to be like, how do you tell people this? Hey, my dad was a fugitive. That's such a story to tell. How did you feel about all of that? Like, here you are. Well, let me take a step back. When you went to see him, because you after he left your family, and then you had a connection with him, and that whole time, were you just trying to rebuild a relationship with your dad?
He didn't let me get too close. Like he couldn't handle it. I mean, he loved to be around me and that, because I was his biological daughter, the oldest. I was the closest to him because I'm the oldest. And, but if I got emotional or anything and he pushed me away, he couldn't handle that. Uh, he, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to know my dad. I mean, what daughter doesn't want to know their father?
I will say this, you're right, good or bad, but most people, I mean, I shouldn't say most people, but you were, at the end of the day, no matter what, he was still your dad and you still wanted that connection with him. So even when he was on the run, I mean, like, how did you react when you found out that he escaped?
Well, I knew he had escaped because my grandparents, were sending the paper clippings, and but we would wonder like the things we always wondered. Well, is he hiding in the Bahamas? Is he in witness protection? Is he dead? Is he? There's so many things we wondered. How come didn't contact us? And being that he was adopted, I didn't really know who to contact, and there were some family that he had that were through his adopted family, but no siblings. I really didn't, I had no clue. I mean, it was really a dead end for us, the wondering, you never stopped wondering. Uh, but as time went on, you kind of accept it, the tears stop. And obviously, that moment when I said, well, I guess, I need to accept he's dead. Voila, there he is. Good old Whitey.
Wow. So you said something where you said that there was a lot of things that you stood up for yourself and you felt like you had some confidence. What were some other things that surprised you the most about how you handled the whole situation?
You know, I had a lot of courage because, uh, I actually one day I even called the crown of Ontario. I mean, I called the crown, and my husband said that he goes, "You got a lot of balls." So I'm pretty gutsy. I was calling. I wrote letters all over to government officials. I made phone calls. I was pretty brave, and yeah, because I mean, I literally failed first and third grade because first of all, I hated school and I didn't know what was going on, and my childhood was so stormy that you know. Paying attention at school was the last thing I wanted to do. So yeah, but I did things, yeah, it built self-confidence for sure, and talking, I would have never talked on talk radio, or I mean, they had me on talk radio the night he had died around midnight. I was on talk radio, CBC talk radio at 9 o'clock the next morning. And, in a real studio and all that.
So what about other people? Like before he was caught and he was a fugitive, were you embarrassed by the story or were you proud about it? Or you're just like, hey, this is my story?
I'm more of that person. Hey, this is my story. It's colorful. Even with time now, I'm learning things years after he's passed away. He lived for about 3 years after he was arrested in the nursing home, which they were very good to him there. But shortly, after he had died, I had been starting to feel sick. I found out I had a brain tumor. I had brain surgery. I've been hit hard, and I've just been through a lot. So, but the one of the sweetest things in the nursing home, we spent a lot of time there. Uh, we flew in and out of Winnipeg to Los Angeles and spent a lot of time and money. But about 2 weeks before he died, he loved his food. He loved his hamburgers or whatever. He ate like crap, which probably didn't help his health at all. And I was feeding him a hamburger, and he looked up at me from his wheelchair and he goes, "God, I fucking love you." And that little girl got what she was looking for. It's a moment
Oh,
that I'll never forget. And you know, Whitey was just Whitey. He was larger than life. He when he walked in a room, he had charisma. He had that kind of way that people noticed him. People remembered him. That was who he was. And you don't find that, you don't learn that. You're born with that.
wow. So, do you feel like there's a part of him, of who he was, or, what he embodied in you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm probably the most like my mother in a lot of ways, but I definitely have a lot of my father in me. Yeah, definitely. I think all three of us kids do, but I think we all tend to have, that free spirit in us. I know I do. My brother does. And then, after my father passed away about a year later, or not even, I got a message from Facebook that there's some information that I might want to know. And I look at the picture of this guy, and I'm thinking, I'm telling my friend in Canada, and as I'm saying it, I go, "That's my brother." Well, sure enough, when I was 3, my father got the bank teller pregnant in Winnipeg, and she went to from Winnipeg to Calgary and gave him up for adoption. And so, I've gotten to know him. And then about a month ago, I got another message, and a friend of this gentleman, who is my other brother I didn't know about. So yeah, we keep thinking, who's next? My sister and I keep saying, well, there's no sister yet because we're the only two girls.
Wow, that is crazy. I'm sure you're learning more and more as time goes by, all these things about your father. Some people might listen to this, Lisa, and they might be thinking, Like, I don't know what I would do if I had a father like that. Maybe even go into that negative route. So, what do you think people must misunderstand about situations like this?
Well, I had it from some family members, cousins and stuff, and, kind of like, he's a bad man. Why would you bother? Well, you know what? Everybody has their own journey.
Mm,
And at the end of the day, I serve God, and whether my dad deserved us or not, it's not even the point. You know, I needed to know the truth. I got to know him. I got to spend times with him as a grown woman. And, it's a lot different than when you're a child. And he knew he wasn't going to mess with his girls. But there's mean people. I mean, I got some really mean things happen. But, well, they're not in my shoes. So who knows what they would do if it happened to them? I don't let the things bother me.
right. Would you say that this experience not only gave you a confidence, as you mentioned, but maybe even like strengthen your will? Because it's almost like, you said that you had, a brain tumor and you had all these other things happening to you, and you feel like, did that experience with your father being on the run and all of that, did you feel like that prepared you or maybe made you withstand hard things in life?
Absolutely. I mean, look, everybody has a different personality. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm fortunate. I can be a hothead. The nicest person you'll meet. I'm as loyal as they come, but you push me too far, and that other side pop out. But things build character in you when you go through those kind of things, and it's your choice on how you handle it. I choose to walk in forgiveness. I don't. I don't want to be bitter. I want to be better, and I really believe in that for my life. That's the choice I made.
Mhm.
I got to spend that time with my dad. That was super precious. A couple of weeks before he passed away, my mother flew into, she's still alive, and she flew into Winnipeg because um, her sister-in-law passed away. So she came in. I said, Mom, are you going to go see him? Do you want to come to the nursing home? She said, I don't know. I don't know. And I know my mom. She's so cute. And she goes, okay, okay. So that moment that my mom walked in, and he by that time was bedridden, and watching that whole, this is 42 years later, it was really touching and really something to watch. She said, I forgive you, Whitey. Not that Whitey asked for forgiveness, because God forbid.
Mhm.
And they talked, he called her Dodo back in the day. And I think my mom was always really the love of his life, but uh, she couldn't take it anymore. So, but anyway, we sat with them, and then and they talked, and listening to them talk about some things were, very touching for me. And then we held hands with him, my mom and the three of us were holding hands, and we prayed with him and led him to the Lord, which was amazing, because he was very anti-God. I mean, even on his deathbed, I said, Daddy, by then he was out of it. I said, Daddy, it's okay, you can go. And he got mad at me even when he was on his last breath. He got, like, really flustered with me. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this man." He's just, yeah, he was one strong person for sure.
If you could ask your father one question today, what would it be?
"Why didn't you contact us? And aren't you sorry? Like, say it." You know? All I ever got out of him is, "Yeah, I screwed up," but that was because I put a lot of pressure on him, but, the one thing when he was in the nursing home, they were very good to him there, thank God, because tying down Whitey wasn't, he was a free spirit, obviously. But he would say, "Oh, those are my girls. Those are my girls." And you could just see how proud he was of us. And the biggest thing was regret. I saw a lot of regret. He wanted
Mhm.
to come to California to meet his grandchildren. At that point, he even had great grandchildren. And, I tried so hard to make that happen.
Mhm.
And, when I carried back his ashes through the airport, which Whitey was heavy. Got back to Los Angeles. We went out on my son's yacht, and let his ashes go out here outside of Huntington Beach, California. And my mom was there, and my kids were there, my siblings. And anyways, the ashes flew back, and my mom was holding her beer bottle, and the ashes circled the top of her bottle, and she was about to drink it. And my son grabbed the bottle real quick. We're like, "Oh, mom, you almost drank Whitey." So we have a really good sense of humor. Um, thank God. I think if you were a really stiff person and were overly serious, and you might take it different. But we laughed a lot, and we found a lot of humor. We have a very good sense of humor, and that's probably a big part of what got us through it.
Lisa, you told me that you've been telling your stories, your story to other people on podcasts and other shows. What's next for you? What do you see coming for you?
Well, I know I have a phenomenal story. I mean, I'm giving you the tidbit of who Whitey was and who we were, and who I am. But I've been trying to write. I'm not a writer, but I've been writing. They call it a treatment in the movie industry, and a pitch deck, and I'm getting close to getting that done. Thank God for AI, help me put it in the format that it's supposed to be. I watch a lot of movies. I'm a movie buff, a lot of crappy movies out there. Come on. This got this has just got so much to it. Um, I mean, just recently when I contacted my new brother, through his friend who found us for my brother, was telling me he knows the guy that was going across this lake or river from US into Canada, carrying the marijuana for my father, and got busted. And he knows
Mm.
the guy. I mean, things still are unfolding, and it's just so crazy. I just found that out recently. So I know. Like our attorney, he was the biggest criminal attorney in Canada. And he said, "You can't make this stuff up." And I I know I have an amazing story.
What do you want people to know about Whitey?
He was larger than life. He was a shyster. um, you know, uh, he, I think deep inside he did care. Like, one time we were on the river, and we were in our boat, and we went to this one place, and it had a pool, and my sister decided to take off. We thought she was on the bottom of the boat, and the other parent thought she was on the top. And as we're going down the river back towards the city, we realized my sister's not on the boat. Well, of course, panic overstruck us, and I had some dumb little doll thing I'm praying on. And we're young, maybe 9 years old, 10 years old. And so on the way back, a boat was on fire, a ski boat, and three people were in the water, and the one guy was burning. Skin was like he was burning on the boat. My dad jumped on that boat, got that guy. We had to get the people out of the water. The one woman was about 9 months pregnant. And we had a radio in and have an ambulance meet us. And thank God my sister was fine. She decided to go back to the pool and was sitting with the lifeguard crying. But if it wouldn't have been for us, who knows what would happen to those people. So he was that kind of guy that in an emergency, he was amazing that way. But Whitey did it Whitey's way.
Lisa, what an incredible story. I mean, that is quite a story. And I really do hope it becomes larger than life on the movie screen. Lisa, where could we find you, or where could people find you if they want to reach out, or maybe even share their own stories, or maybe even reach out to you to have you on their podcast? Where can we find you?
Well, they could go to my email for one. I'm at LA for Malibu, 18 at gmail.com. And then Facebook, Lisa Shane, Shane Alexander. I'm under that. And yeah.
We'll put all of those links in the show notes if you want to get a hold of Lisa. Again, Lisa, what an incredible story. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing it. And I'm sure that every time you tell the story, something new comes up that you didn't share the last one. And I'm sure even when you were telling me that there's new things that keep coming up. So it's never going to be the same story, which is always interesting, right? But I want to again thank you for coming on. If you want to reach Lisa, All her information will be on the episode notes. But before you go, just make sure to subscribe to Mom is My Emergency Contact wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, and all major platforms. And if you'd rather watch the conversation, head over to our YouTube channel. Just search Mom is My Emergency Contact and hit subscribe. Wow. Amazing story. It really reminds us that life is rarely as simple as we think it is. But how powerful it is how when people can move forward, as Lisa has shown us, and forgive and just enjoying the wonderful stories of this person who is her father and carrying that positivity on. Just amazing. Again, thank you for sharing your story, so personal, so extraordinary with us today. It takes a lot of courage to tell a story like this, and we appreciate you trusting us with yours. And to everyone listening, sometimes the truth about our past doesn't define us, but how we respond to it absolutely does. This has been another episode of Too Crazy to Be True. Until next time, bye.